Darfur. Darfur has been the monster under my bed for a long time. Over the past several years, I've heard it rumbling. It seems so terrible, and I have not wanted to know how terrible it really is, as if denial would absolve me from responsibility. Occasionally, I would see a news story and hear debates about the proper use of the term genocide. The monster of Darfur, scary to consider. I have enough dragons to slay without looking under my bed. Who needs to go to Africa when there are battles to be won here? I've gone to Washington 3 times to try to stop the war in Iraq. The religious right of this country is persecuting gays and lesbians. Racism still affects justice in this city. Isn't there enough to do without looking at the monster under my bed? There may be many local and global problems, but few as big as Darfur. Darfur is a region in the country of Sudan in Africa. It's been embroiled in a deadly conflict over 3 years. At least 400,000 people have been killed. 2 million innocent civilians have been forced to flee and live in displaced person camps in the Sudan or in refugee camps in neighboring Chad. There are more than 3.5 million men, women, and children are completely reliant on international aid for survival. Not since the Rwandan genocide of 1994 has the world seen such a calculated campaign of displacement, starvation, rape, and mass slaughter. The Unitarian Universalist Service Committee has chosen to focus on Darfur this spring and urges congregations to look seriously at ways to help. It's chosen to channel their donations through organizations that are working with grassroots communities such in Chad, such as Darfur Peace and Development, working in coordination with 34 grassroots organizations to achieve sustainable development and coexistence in the Darfur region. Darfur is a huge problem, and each of us here probably could do something to help. But I think we all knew that before I started my sermon today. But as I look at the situation in Darfur and throughout history, genocide, I struggle with 3 questions. What is genocide? What is our responsibility to stop it? And do we mean it when we say never again? Roughly translated from the Greek, genocide means race killing or family killing or tribe killing. It's the killing of people with the same genetics or sociologically people who we've been able to identify somehow as the other. The prime example, of course, is in World War II, the Holocaust. The military might of the Nazis exterminated 6 million Jews. There are several factors that make this a genocide. First, that a group is designated as other or the target. Second is overwhelming military force. The Jews were basically defenseless. 3, the force was unprovoked. The Nazis used Jews as a scapegoat for their social problems. And 4, large numbers of people die. Whenever someone claims that a genocide is taking place, the alleged perpetrators always deny the charge. They may claim that they were provoked, that the targeted group attacked first, or perhaps they were preparing attacks so that a preemptive strike was necessary. They may deny the number of casualties. How many victims are enough for the claim of genocide. There's estimates that 100,000 people died under the reign of Saddam Hussein. Was that genocide? Our president has estimated that 30,000 civilians had died as a result of our invasion. IraqBodyCount.net estimates 51,000. An October journal in the Lancet Medical Journal estimates over 600,000. About 20 people a year are executed by the state of North Carolina. Is that a genocide? Where is the magic number that changes a murder to a policy, to a war, to a genocide? What point does the number rise from collateral damage to genocide? Last month, Hrant Dink, a journalist in Turkey, was assassinated for writing about the Ottoman Empire had committed genocide against Armenians during World War I. Several times the government had convicted him on the charge of insulting Turkishness. Turkey denies that the genocide took place. They say that the numbers are inflated and the deaths occurred during wartime at the end of the Ottoman Empire. It's hard to admit that one's ancestors have done something terrible, that one benefits from the crimes of the past. Rush Limbaugh has said, "There are more American Indians alive today than there were when Columbus arrived or at any other time in history. Does this sound like a record of genocide?" What he failed to mention was that 100 years ago, Native American people were nearly extinct on this continent, and their kids were shipped to schools to convert them to white culture. Genocide is ugly. No one wants to admit it's happening, because if you admit it's happening or say the word, it makes us responsible. The United Nations Convention on Prevention and Punishment of Genocide offers a definition, and I'll read some of the parts, that it's killing members of the group, obviously, and then deliberately inflicting on a group the conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part. I was in Raleigh yesterday at the NAACP march, and the word genocide was tossed out, referring to the drug policies and the school policies that make a disproportionate of young African Americans die violently in our society. Is that a proper use of the word genocide? And Article 3 says the following acts should be punishable. Genocide, conspiracy to commit genocide, public incitement to commit genocide, attempt to commit genocide, complicity in genocide. Well, the word complicity damns us all. If looking the other way is complicity. And that leads to my second question. Are we responsible? If the neighbors down the block are arguing, is it my business? Maybe. Well, if there's physical violence, maybe I'll call the police. If I hear a gunshot, I'm definitely calling the police. But the temptation is not to get involved in a family struggle. If two ethnic groups in Russia are shooting at each other, do we have the right to intervene? Suppose the warring parties are in an even fight. 100,000 die on each side. That's not genocide, that's just a civil war. But what if one side kills 190,000 and the other side kills only 10,000. Well, because it's disproportionate, the 200,000 people suddenly, same number of people dead, become genocide. What if the weaker group stupidly attacked first? Is the stronger group engaged in self-defense or overkill? Do we have the right to get involved in the internal affairs of another country? How would we feel if some country thought that we were mistreating some minority population, say confining them to small pieces of land in the desert, and attacked us? On the other hand, did we liberate Iraqi from a dictator who had killed 100,000 of his own people? Who will liberate Iraqis from their current situation? But our intervention in Kosovo seemed to work better, keeping Serbs from killing Albanians. It's not clear what the result will be in Afghanistan. Would the presence of U.S. troops help or harm the situation in Sudan? What does it mean to be a superpower? Does it mean that we have the power to prevent genocide, the responsibility to prevent genocide? Swift unilateral action might have stopped genocides that happened quickly, like in Rwanda, if troops would have been sent immediately. But by the time the World Committee tried to figure out, is this genocide happening? Too many people were dead. Does being a superpower mean that we get to determine who are the heroes and who are the villains? Even though international cooperation is slower, it can work. And the intervention doesn't always have to be military. Economic pressure helped end apartheid in South Africa. Are we responsible for what happens everywhere in the world? Earlier I asked, do we have the right to intervene? But the flip side of that question is, do we have the right to turn our backs? Do we have the right to look away simply because it's possible to look away? We live lives of privilege compared to the rest of the world. We are easily distracted from the important things in life. Or maybe we are busy doing important things already. I heard the list of announcements this morning. You guys are busy. I could preach a new sermon each week on some noble cause. Darfur is the cause this week. But every noble cause begs the spiritual question. People make a false dichotomy, I think, between social action and spirituality. But I think it comes down to the spiritual question of power. Sometimes the Almighty or the Infinite is referred to as the Almighty. Each of us has limited power. Not one of us, not even our whole country, is omnipotent. Each of us has one precious life, and because we are so small, we need each other. If we refuse to share or use our power, it dies with us. Power, we think of saving ourselves, but we only make ourselves smaller. Outreach makes us part of something bigger than ourselves. We share our power with others and become part of the interdependent web. Power is a spiritual issue. It carries with it a moral choice. We use our power for good or for evil. We are not almighty, but we do, each of us, have a little power we can share. Writing to the legislator, writing a check, we might just right a wrong. There's uncertainty, to be sure. Each day we decide how to use our power. 2 years ago, I stood with some ministers downtown offering prayers for Darfur. I went because one of my friends asked me to. I knew little about Darfur. Someone planted a seed by inviting me to learn. They shared the power of awareness. And I tucked it under my bed for a couple of years, because what little I saw knew that this was way too big of a problem for what I had on my plate. I hate being aware of genocide. I'm generally an optimistic person. I generally feel positive about humanity. Genocide is a reminder that there is evil in the world. It's part of the human condition. We say never again, but it happens again and again and again. We stand on Cherokee land. We are the benefactors, the beneficiaries of genocide. We are the great-grandchildren of the evil we decry. The armies of the world destroy, yet sometimes save. It's hard to know when to use them and when to hold our fire. People try to deny genocide, from Armenia to Auschwitz to Africa to America. It has happened, it is happening, and will happen again. I think deep down we mean it when we say never again. We want that to be true, and we are determined to make it true, but it withers on the winds of uncertainty. Never again is an ideal we strive for, and we are less than our ideals. Yet we persist in pursuing them. Our failures are but reminders that we need to try again. We have power to intervene in Darfur. May we use our power wisely. I open it up to you. I know many of you have studied this much more than I have. What are your thoughts on Darfur, genocide, our responsibility for people on the other side of the world?